She helps a nervous CEO with her speech. He can't stop thinking about her. So he searches for her all over the city to invite her on a romantic cruise trip. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel and let's get started. The fluorescent lights of the conference room buzzed overhead, illuminating the perspiration on Alexander Reed's forehead. He paced back and forth, running his fingers through his perfectly styled hair, now slightly disheveled from the constant nervous gesture. As CEO of Reed Enterprises, one of the fastest-growing tech companies in the country, he had given countless presentations and speeches, but this one felt different. Tomorrow's investor conference would determine whether his company secured the funding needed for their ambitious expansion into international markets. Everything he had built over the last decade hung in the balance. "Mr. Reed?" His assistant Emma knocked timidly on the doorframe. "The speech coach is here." Alexander checked his watch. It was already 7 p.m., and most of his employees had left for the day. He had been rehearsing for hours, yet the words still felt foreign on his tongue. "Send her in," he sighed, straightening his navy blue tie and smoothing down his tailored suit jacket. He had initially resisted when his board suggested hiring a speech coach, his pride getting in the way. But after the disastrous dry run yesterday, where he had stumbled over key points and failed to convey the passion his vision deserved, he had relented. The woman who walked in wasn't what he expected. Instead of the stern, bespectacled professional he had imagined, she was young, probably in her late 20s, with warm brown eyes and curly hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore a modest emerald green dress that complemented her olive skin and carried a worn leather messenger bag rather than a briefcase. "Mr. Reed," she said, extending her hand, "I'm Olivia Morales. Thank you for making time in your schedule." Her handshake was firm and confident, her smile genuine. Something about her unpretentious demeanor immediately put him slightly more at ease. "I appreciate you coming on such short notice," he replied, gesturing to the conference table scattered with his notes and half-empty coffee cups. "Though I have to warn you, you might be wasting your time. I've been told I'm rather stubborn." Olivia laughed, a melodic sound that seemed to brighten the sterile conference room. "Most successful people are. Stubbornness can be a virtue when it's directed properly." She set her bag down and pulled out a small digital recorder. "Do you mind if I record our session? It helps me provide more specific feedback." Alexander nodded, watching as she efficiently set up her equipment. There was something captivating about her movements, purposeful yet graceful, without any of the nervousness people often displayed in his presence. "Before we start with your speech, let's talk about what's really bothering you," Olivia said, sitting down and motioning for him to join her. "What's bothering me is that I have a crucial presentation tomorrow and suddenly I've forgotten how to string two coherent sentences together," he said with a self-deprecating smile. Olivia studied him thoughtfully. "I doubt that very much, Mr. Reed. You didn't build a company like Reed Enterprises by forgetting how to speak effectively." "Alexander," he corrected her. "Please." "Alexander," she acknowledged with a nod. "What's different about this speech compared to others you've given?" He paused, considering her question. Most people didn't cut to the heart of matters so quickly with him. "Everything is riding on it," he admitted. "If we don't secure this funding, we'll have to scale back our expansion plans significantly. 3 years of strategy and development, all the late nights and sacrifices my team has made. It could all be for nothing. So it's not just your reputation on the line. You feel responsible for your employees, for their dreams and hard work," she observed. Alexander felt a weight lift slightly from his shoulders. She understood. "Yes, exactly." "That's actually good news," Olivia said, her eyes lighting up. "How do you figure?" "The best speeches come from a place of authentic emotion. You're not just selling a business plan tomorrow, Alexander. You're fighting for your team. That passion is what will connect with your audience." She reached for his speech notes. "May I?" For the next hour, Olivia worked with him, first listening to him deliver the speech as it was written, then helping him reshape it into something more personal. She didn't drastically change the content, but reorganized it to build a more compelling narrative. What surprised Alexander most was how attentively she listened, not just to his words but to the subtle meanings behind them. "You keep talking about market share and projected revenue, but what really animates you is how your technology helps people," she observed. "Why not lead with that? Tell them the story of why you started this company in the first place." Alexander remembered the day he had conceived of Reed Enterprises. He had been visiting his grandmother in the hospital, frustrated by the outdated systems that had resulted in a medication error that nearly cost her life. His initial motivation hadn't been profit, but creating better healthcare integration systems that could prevent such mistakes. "The investors care about returns, not heartwarming stories," he argued, though without much conviction. Olivia shook her head. "Investors are people too. They want to put their money behind someone with vision and purpose, not just promising numbers. The figures are in your presentation packets. They can read those anytime. What they can't get from a report is your passion, your commitment." As the night progressed, Alexander found himself opening up more. Olivia had a gift for asking just the right questions, for gently pushing him out of his comfort zone without making him feel exposed or vulnerable. When she suggested he practice without his notes, he initially balked but soon found that the key points flowed more naturally in his own words rather than the carefully crafted phrases his PR team had prepared. "That was much better," she said after his fourth run-through. "You're connecting with the material now, but I still sense you're holding something back." Alexander ran a hand through his hair again, a gesture Olivia had now seen enough times to recognize as a sign of his inner conflict. "I've never been good at revealing too much of myself," he admitted. "In my position, you learn to maintain a certain distance." Olivia's expression softened. "I understand, but tomorrow, those investors need to see not just Alexander Reed, CEO, but Alexander Reed, the man with a mission, the person who cares deeply about changing healthcare for the better." She paused, then added gently, "Sometimes our greatest strength comes from allowing ourselves to be seen, truly seen." Their eyes met, and for a moment, Alexander felt as though she could indeed see right through the carefully constructed facade he presented to the world. It was unsettling, but also strangely liberating. By 10 p.m., the speech had transformed. It was still professional and data-driven where it needed to be, but now it also told a story, his story, and conveyed the genuine purpose behind Reed Enterprises' ambitious plans. "I think we've made excellent progress," Olivia said, packing up her recorder. "You're a natural storyteller when you allow yourself to be." "I had an excellent teacher," Alexander replied, surprised by how reluctant he felt to end their session. Over the past 3 hours he had grown accustomed to her presence, to the way she listened so intently, to her encouraging smiles when he got something right. Would you be willing to meet me tomorrow morning before the conference, just for a final run-through?" Olivia hesitated, checking her calendar on her phone. "I have another client at 8 a.m., but I could meet you at 7? The conference starts at 10, right?" 7 a.m. is perfect. I'll have coffee waiting," he said, feeling oddly pleased. "Can I call you a car?" "No need," she replied with a smile. "I take the subway. It's faster this time of night anyway." Alexander frowned slightly. "At least let me walk you to the station. It's late." "I appreciate the offer, but I've been navigating this city by myself for years," Olivia said, slinging her messenger bag over her shoulder. "Besides, you should get some rest. Tomorrow is a big day." Before he could insist further, his phone buzzed with an incoming call from his CFO. When he looked up from the screen, Olivia was already at the door. "Remember what we talked about," she said. "Connect with your purpose, and the words will follow. Good night, Alexander." "Good night, Olivia," he replied, watching as she disappeared down the corridor. After finishing his call, Alexander gathered his notes, noticing that Olivia had left behind a small notebook. He picked it up, intending to return it to her in the morning. As he flipped it open to see if her name was inside, a loose page fell out. A sketch, he realized with surprise. It was a quick but skillful drawing of him mid-speech, capturing an expression of passion and conviction that he hardly recognized as his own. Below the sketch, she had written, "This is who they need to see tomorrow." Alexander carefully tucked the sketch back into the notebook, a strange warmth spreading through his chest. For the first time in weeks, he felt confident about the speech. But more than that, he found himself looking forward to seeing Olivia Morales again, this enigmatic woman who had somehow seen past his CEO persona to the person underneath. As he left the office building, the cool night air clearing his mind, Alexander realized he knew virtually nothing about Olivia beyond her name and profession. Yet somehow, in just a few hours, she had understood him better than colleagues he had worked with for years. Tomorrow, he decided, after the conference, he would make a point of learning more about the woman who had so effortlessly broken through his carefully constructed walls. Alexander woke before his alarm, the pale dawn light filtering through his penthouse windows. He had slept surprisingly well despite the pressure of the day ahead. Olivia's notebook sat on his nightstand where he had placed it the night before, a tangible reminder of their session and the transformation it had brought about in his speech. As he showered and dressed, selecting his lucky charcoal gray suit and the red tie his sister had given him for his last birthday, Alexander found himself rehearsing the speech with a newfound confidence. The words flowed naturally now, infused with the personal touches Olivia had helped him incorporate. He arrived at the office building at 6:30 a.m., instructing the in-house barista to prepare a selection of pastries and coffee for his meeting with Olivia. He wasn't sure what she preferred, so he ordered several options: a latte, an Americano, and a chai tea, along with an assortment of breakfast pastries. At precisely 7 a.m., the elevator doors opened, and Olivia stepped out. Today she wore a simple navy blue dress with a white blazer, her curly hair loose around her shoulders. The sight of her made Alexander pause mid-sentence as he rehearsed a section of his speech. "Good morning," she said with a warm smile, setting down her messenger bag. "You look well rested. How are you feeling about today?" "Surprisingly good," Alexander admitted, returning her smile. "Your help last night was invaluable. Oh, and I ordered coffee, though I wasn't sure what you preferred." Olivia looked touched by the gesture. "The chai tea would be perfect, thank you." She accepted the cup he offered. "And before we begin, I believe I left my notebook here last night?" Alexander retrieved it from his briefcase. "Yes, I was going to return it to you. I hope you don't mind, but a sketch fell out when I was checking if your name was inside." A faint blush colored Olivia's cheeks. "Ah, yes. I hope you weren't offended. I tend to sketch during my sessions. It helps me capture expressions and emotions that clients might not be aware of themselves." "Not at all," Alexander assured her. "It was insightful, actually. You captured something I didn't know was there." Their eyes met briefly, and Alexander felt an unexpected flutter in his chest. He cleared his throat, breaking the moment. "Should we get started?" For the next hour, they refined his delivery, with Olivia offering subtle suggestions to enhance his body language and vocal inflections. The rapport they had established the night before deepened as they worked, and Alexander found himself not just accepting her feedback, but actively seeking it. "You've made remarkable progress," Olivia said as they wrapped up the session. "Your board made a wise decision in hiring you a coach, though I suspect you'd have found your way to this version of the speech eventually on your own." Alexander shook his head. "No, this is your doing. I've never approached a presentation this way before. You have a real gift, Olivia." "Thank you, but the content and passion were already there. I just helped you uncover them." She glanced at her watch. "I should get going. My next client is across town." Alexander felt a pang of disappointment. "Of course, but—" He hesitated, then reached for his wallet, extracting a business card. "Would you let me know how it goes? The presentation, I mean. I'd value your professional opinion." Olivia looked momentarily surprised but took the card. "I wish I could attend, but I'm fully booked today. I'm sure you'll be brilliant, though." She scribbled something on a page of her notebook, tore it out, and handed it to him. "Here's my number. Text me after, and let me know how it went." Their fingers brushed as he took the paper, and that strange flutter returned to Alexander's chest. "I will. And thank you again, Olivia, for everything." After she left, Alexander spent the remaining time before the conference reviewing his notes one last time. The slip of paper with Olivia's number remained in his hand, and he carefully transferred it to his phone before tucking the original into his wallet. At 9:45 a.m., Alexander arrived at the Grand Meridian Hotel where the investor conference was being held. His executive team was already there, running through last-minute preparations and distributing presentation packets. "You seem different today," observed Miranda Chen, his CFO, as they waited in the wings of the conference room. "More centered." Alexander thought of Olivia's advice to connect with his purpose. "I am. I've remembered why we're doing this in the first place." Miranda raised an eyebrow but nodded approvingly. "Good. That's what they need to hear." At 10 a.m. sharp, Alexander was introduced to a room filled with potential investors, industry analysts, and financial reporters. As he took the podium, he felt a moment of the old nervousness, but then he recalled Olivia's sketch, that version of himself filled with conviction and purpose. Taking a deep breath, he began to speak. The presentation flowed better than any he had given before. He started with the story of his grandmother, painting a vivid picture of the real-world problems their technology aimed to solve. When he transitioned to the data and projections, he did so in the context of their mission, making the numbers tell a human story rather than just representing cold facts. By the time he concluded, the energy in the room was palpable. The Q&A session that followed was equally successful. Alexander fielded questions with a combination of technical expertise and genuine passion that seemed to resonate with the audience. When the conference concluded, he was immediately surrounded by interested investors, many expressing preliminary commitments pending further discussions. "That was," Miranda whispered when she finally managed to pull him aside, "extraordinary. Whatever got into you, keep it there." Alexander smiled, the triumph of the moment tempered by a strong desire to share it with Olivia. As soon as he had a moment alone, he pulled out his phone and composed a text. "The speech went better than I could have hoped. We've already secured verbal commitments for nearly 70% of our funding goal. I couldn't have done it without your guidance. Thank you." He hesitated, then added, "I'd like to thank you properly. Dinner, perhaps?" Alexander stared at the additional line for a long moment before deleting it. It wasn't appropriate to blur the lines between professional and personal, no matter how much he might want to see her again. He sent the edited message, then pocketed his phone and returned to the networking session, accepting congratulations and discussing potential partnerships. It was nearly an hour later when he felt his phone vibrate with a response. "Congratulations. I knew you had it in you. The clarity of purpose always shines through when we speak from the heart. It was a pleasure working with you." Alexander read the message several times, trying to discern any subtext in her words. Was this a polite professional sign-off? He typed several responses, deleting each one before settling on, "The pleasure was mine. If I ever need a speech coach again, you'll be my first call." Her reply came quickly. "I hope your next speech won't be under such pressure. Best of luck with your expansion plans." The finality of her tone was unmistakable. Their professional relationship had concluded, and she was gracefully closing the door on further interaction. Alexander felt a disproportionate sense of disappointment as he slipped his phone back into his pocket. The rest of the day passed in a blur of meetings, congratulations, and strategic discussions. By evening, when Alexander finally returned to his penthouse, preliminary agreements had been reached with enough investors to fully fund their expansion plans. It should have been one of the most satisfying days of his professional life. Instead, as he loosened his tie and poured himself a celebratory scotch, Alexander found his thoughts returning repeatedly to Olivia. He had met countless remarkable people in his career, brilliant minds, powerful personalities, extraordinary talents, yet none had affected him quite like she had in their brief time together. He took out his phone again, scrolling to their brief text exchange. It would be easy enough to find a reason to contact her again professionally. Reed Enterprises hosted quarterly shareholder meetings that required speeches, or perhaps he could recommend her services to colleagues. But something about manufacturing a professional pretense to see her again felt dishonest, especially after the lesson in authenticity she had taught him. If he wanted to see Olivia again, and he was becoming increasingly certain that he did, he should be straightforward about it. Yet he hesitated. She had been hired to do a job which she had done exceptionally well. Her warm manner and perceptive insights were likely part of her professional approach with all clients. Reading anything more into their interaction would be presumptuous at best, inappropriate at worst. Alexander drained his scotch and set the glass down firmly. No, he would respect the professional boundaries. If their paths crossed again, so be it, but he wouldn't engineer such an encounter. This resolution lasted exactly 3 days. In those 3 days, Alexander closed deals with investors, held strategy meetings with his executive team, and began preliminary outreach to potential international partners. He worked longer hours than usual, trying to immerse himself in the success they had achieved. Yet, in quiet moments, in the back of his car, between meetings, during his morning run, in the stillness of his penthouse at night, his thoughts invariably turned to Olivia. On the 4th day, as he sat in a tedious budget meeting, Alexander found himself sketching absently on his notepad. It took him several minutes to realize he was attempting to recreate the drawing Olivia had made of him. His poor imitation only highlighted how skillfully she had captured him, seeing something in him that he hadn't recognized in himself. That evening, he made a decision. He would contact her once more, not with a manufactured professional pretense, but with a simple, honest invitation. If she declined, he would accept it gracefully and move on. But he had to try, or he'd always wonder what might have been. Picking up his phone, Alexander began to compose a new message to Olivia. Alexander stared at the blank text message for several minutes, typing and deleting multiple versions before finally settling on, "Olivia, it's Alexander Reed. I know our professional relationship has concluded, but I've found myself thinking about our conversations. Would you consider having dinner with me sometime? No business agenda, just 2 people getting to know each other better." He pressed send before he could second-guess himself again, then set his phone face down on the coffee table and attempted to focus on reviewing quarterly projections. After 15 minutes of reading the same paragraph repeatedly without absorbing any information, he checked his phone. No response. By the next morning, Alexander had checked his phone so many times that Miranda had commented on his unusual distraction during their strategy meeting. Still nothing from Olivia. He considered the possibility that she might be busy with other clients, but as a second day passed with no reply, he was forced to accept that her silence was likely deliberate. "She's not interested," he muttered to himself as he stood at his office window, watching the city lights flicker on at dusk. Message received. Alexander threw himself into work with renewed intensity over the next few days, scheduling back-to-back meetings and extending his already long hours. Yet even as he immersed himself in expanding Reed Enterprises' international presence, thoughts of Olivia continued to surface at unexpected moments. It wasn't just her beauty or intelligence that had captivated him, though both were considerable. It was the way she had seen through his carefully constructed professional persona to the person beneath, and instead of being put off by what she found there, she had encouraged him to embrace it. After a week of silence, Alexander made a decision. He would make one final attempt to contact Olivia, this time through her employer. If nothing came of it, he would respect her implicit rejection and move on, A quick internet search for Olivia Morales speech coach yielded surprisingly few results, just a simple professional website with minimal information and no company affiliation. She's independent, Alexander realized, scrolling through the sparse details on her site. The contact information listed only an email address and a downtown office number, which he recognized as belonging to one of those shared workspace buildings where freelancers could rent meeting rooms by the hour. The next afternoon between meetings, Alexander found himself standing in the lobby of the modern glass building listed as Olivia's business address. The receptionist, a young man with a fashionable haircut and an expression of perpetual boredom, looked up as he approached. "I'm looking for Olivia Morales," Alexander said, feeling strangely nervous. "I understand she uses this space for client meetings." The receptionist tapped at his computer. "Ms. Morales isn't scheduled to use any of our facilities today. Would you like to leave a message?" "Does she come in regularly?" Alexander asked, then immediately regretted the question when the receptionist's expression turned wary. "I'm afraid I can't share our clients' schedules," he replied coolly. "Data privacy regulations." Alexander nodded. "Of course, I apologize." He pulled out a business card and wrote a brief note on the back. "I'd still like to have that dinner. Call me if you change your mind." He handed it to the receptionist. "Could you please give this to her when you see her?" The receptionist accepted the card with a non-committal nod, and Alexander left, chiding himself for what felt increasingly like borderline stalking behavior. If Olivia wanted to contact him, she had his number. His persistence was becoming uncomfortable even to himself. Back at his office, Alexander found Miranda waiting with several executives from their new European partners. Forcing thoughts of Olivia aside, he threw himself into the negotiations, not emerging from the conference room until well after 9 p.m. As he packed up his briefcase to head home, Alexander noticed Olivia's notebook, which he had placed in his desk drawer after their session. He had meant to mail it back to her but had forgotten in the whirlwind of post-conference activities. He opened it again, flipping through the pages filled with her observations and sketches from other coaching sessions, faces he didn't recognize captured in quick, skillful strokes. Examining her drawings more closely, Alexander noticed certain artistic tendencies, her emphasis on expressive eyes, the way she captured motion with minimal lines, her attention to emotional nuance. The style reminded him of something he had seen recently, but he couldn't place where. Then it hit him. A promotional poster for an exhibition at the Weber Gallery, featuring emerging local artists. The drawing style had been similar, though he couldn't recall if Olivia's name had been among those listed. It was a long shot, but at this point, Alexander was willing to grasp at straws. The next evening, instead of heading home after work, Alexander directed his driver to the Weber Gallery in the Arts District. The opening reception for the new exhibition was in full swing when he arrived. The space crowded with a mix of serious art collectors and fashionable young people more interested in being seen than in the artwork. Alexander felt conspicuously out of place in his business suit among the creatively dressed crowd, but he moved methodically through the gallery, scanning for Olivia while pretending to study each piece. The exhibition featured work from 10 local artists, but none of them was Olivia Morales. Disappointed but not deterred, Alexander approached the gallery owner, a thin woman with dramatic silver hair and oversized architectural jewelry. "Excellent turnout tonight," he commented, accepting a glass of mediocre white wine from a passing server. "Indeed," she agreed, eyeing his suit with interest. "Are you looking to add to your collection, Mr. Reed?" Alexander Reed. He sipped the wine, hiding a wince at its acidic taste. "Actually, I'm trying to locate an artist whose work I admire. Olivia Morales? I thought her style was similar to some of what you're showing tonight." The gallery owner's eyebrows rose slightly. "I don't represent an Olivia Morales, but if her work is similar to what you see here, you might check the Artemis Collective. They showcase a lot of emerging talent with this aesthetic." Alexander thanked her and made a mental note to look up the Artemis Collective. As he was leaving, he overheard a conversation about another gallery opening happening that weekend at a space called The Warehouse. On impulse, he added it to his mental list. Over the next 2 weeks, Alexander found himself venturing into a part of the city he had rarely visited before. The network of small galleries, art cooperatives, and studio spaces that made up the arts district. His evenings, once filled with extended work hours or business dinners, were now spent wandering through exhibition openings and artist talks. "Since when are you interested in contemporary art?" his sister Jennifer asked when he canceled their usual Sunday brunch to attend a pop-up exhibition. "I'm expanding my horizons," Alexander replied vaguely. He hadn't told anyone about his search for Olivia, aware of how irrational it might seem to others, and perhaps to Olivia herself if she ever found out. Each gallery visit ended in disappointment, with no sign of Olivia. Alexander began to question his own judgment. Was he really this affected by a woman he had spent less than 5 hours with? Had he imagined the connection between them? Then, on a rainy Thursday evening, as he was about to leave yet another fruitless gallery visit, Alexander spotted a familiar flyer on the bulletin board near the exit. It was for a weekend workshop titled Capturing Emotion Expressive Portrait Techniques, led by none other than Olivia Morales, to be held at the Artemis Collective that Saturday. Alexander felt a surge of triumph, followed immediately by uncertainty. Showing up at her workshop after she had ignored his messages would be intrusive, possibly even creepy. Yet the prospect of seeing her again was too tempting to resist. Saturday morning found him standing outside the Artemis Collective, a renovated warehouse space with large windows and an industrial chic aesthetic. Through the glass doors he could see a group of about 15 people setting up easels in a circle. And there, helping a gray-haired woman adjust her drawing board, was Olivia. She wore paint-splattered jeans and a loose blue button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up, her curly hair piled on top of her head in a messy bun. Even in this casual attire, she commanded the room with the same quiet confidence she had displayed during their coaching session. Alexander's hand hovered over the door handle as doubts assailed him. What exactly was his plan here? To enroll in her art workshop as an excuse to talk to her? To wait outside for hours until it ended? Both options seemed absurd now that he was actually here. As he stood frozen in indecision, Olivia looked up and their eyes met through the glass. Her expression shifted from surprise to confusion, then something unreadable as she excused herself from the student she was helping and walked toward the door. Alexander considered fleeing but stood his ground as Olivia pushed open the door and stepped outside, closing it behind her. "Alexander," she said, her voice betraying no emotion, "this is unexpected." "I know," he admitted, feeling foolish under her steady gaze. "I found your workshop flyer at a gallery and I wanted to see you again." "So I gathered from your texts and the message you left at the office space," Olivia said. She wasn't cold exactly, but the warmth he remembered from their session was noticeably absent. "I didn't respond because I didn't think it was appropriate. Because I was a client," Alexander guessed. Olivia hesitated. "Partly, yes, but also because—" She glanced back at her waiting students. "Look, I need to start my workshop. Why don't you come back when we finish at 4? We can talk then." Alexander nodded, relief washing over him. "I'll be here." As Olivia returned to her class, Alexander walked away with a lighter step than he had managed in weeks. She hadn't exactly welcomed his presence with open arms, but she hadn't sent him away either. For now, that was enough. Alexander spent the next 6 hours in a nearby cafe, attempting to review business documents on his tablet, but finding himself checking the time every few minutes. At 3:30, unable to concentrate any longer, he paid his bill and walked back to the Artemis Collective, arriving just as the workshop participants began to pack up their supplies. Through the glass doors he watched as Olivia moved from easel to easel, offering final comments and encouragement to each student. There was a natural warmth to her interactions, so different from the reserved demeanor she had shown him earlier. It reminded him of how she had been during their coaching session, perceptive, engaging, genuinely invested in helping others improve. At precisely 4 p.m., the last student left, and Olivia beckoned Alexander inside. The large studio space, now empty except for the two of them, echoed with their footsteps as she led him to a small kitchenette area in the back. "Coffee?" she offered, filling an electric kettle. "Sure, thank you," Alexander replied, taking a seat at the small table. "Your workshop seemed to go well?" Olivia nodded, measuring coffee grounds into a French press. "It did. Most of my students are returning ones. They come back every month for the Saturday session." An awkward silence fell between them as they waited for the water to boil. Alexander took in the studio space, noting the vibrant canvases lining the walls and the organized chaos of art supplies. "So you're a professional artist as well as a speech coach," he observed. "I'm primarily an artist," Olivia corrected him, pouring the hot water into the press. "The speech coaching is a side gig. It helps pay the bills while allowing me time to create and teach." Alexander felt a twinge of embarrassment at his assumption. "I had no idea. Your coaching was so professional, I thought it was your main focus." "That's deliberate," Olivia said, bringing 2 mugs of coffee to the table. "I separate those parts of my life. My speech clients don't usually know about my art career, and my art students don't know I moonlight as a coach for corporate executives." "Why the separation?" Alexander asked, accepting the coffee. Olivia considered the question, stirring a spoonful of sugar into her mug. Different worlds, different expectations. In corporate settings, being known primarily as an artist can undermine credibility. People assume you're flaky or impractical. "That's ridiculous," Alexander said. "Is it?" Olivia raised an eyebrow. "Would you have hired me if you'd known I was just an artist who does speech coaching on the side?" Alexander started to protest, then stopped, realizing she might have a point. The board would certainly have questioned his choice if they'd known. "Exactly," Olivia said, reading his expression. "Hence the professional compartmentalization." "Is that why you didn't respond to my messages?" Alexander asked. "Professional boundaries?" Olivia sighed, wrapping her hands around her mug. "Partly. But it's more complicated than that. Alexander, you're the CEO of a major company. I'm a freelance artist who sometimes coaches executives. The power imbalance there is significant." "I don't see it that way," Alexander countered. "That's precisely the issue," Olivia said gently. "You don't have to see it because you're not affected by it. For you, asking me to dinner is simple. For me, it raises questions. If I decline, do I lose potential professional connections? If I accept, will I be taken seriously in future corporate environments? And that's before we even get to the personal complications." Alexander absorbed her words, realizing he hadn't considered these perspectives. "I understand," he said finally, "and I apologize for putting you in that position." "You don't need to apologize for asking," Olivia said, "but tracking me down after I didn't respond." She let the sentence hang. "Crossed a line," Alexander finished for her. "You're right. That was inappropriate, and I am sorry for that." Olivia studied him for a moment, then nodded, accepting his apology. "So, now that you've found me, what exactly were you hoping would happen?" The directness of her question caught Alexander off guard. What had he been hoping for? He wasn't even sure himself anymore. "Honestly, I don't know," he admitted. I couldn't stop thinking about you after our session, about how you saw things in me that I didn't see in myself, how talking with you felt different from any conversation I've had in years." He paused, meeting her gaze. "I guess I wanted to find out if that connection was real or if I imagined it." Olivia's expression softened slightly. "It wasn't imagined, but connections can be meaningful without needing to be pursued." "I understand if you're not interested," Alexander said. "I'll respect that and leave you alone. But I'd like to know if that's the case. or if it's just the professional concerns holding you back." Olivia was quiet for a long moment, considering her words carefully. "It's not a question of interest or lack thereof. I make it a rule not to date clients, former or otherwise. It complicates the work I do." "I see," Alexander said, trying to hide his disappointment. "But," Olivia continued, "I also believe in being honest. Yes, there was a connection during our session. I felt it too. You surprised me, Alexander Reed. I went in expecting a typical arrogant CEO and instead found someone thoughtful and genuinely passionate about making a difference." Hope flickered in Alexander's chest. So nothing, necessarily," Olivia said firmly. "I'm acknowledging the connection existed. That doesn't mean acting on it is the right choice." Alexander nodded, accepting her boundaries. "I understand. Thank you for being honest with me." He took a sip of his coffee, then changed the subject. "Your artwork is beautiful, by the way. Have you always been an artist?" Olivia seemed to relax as the conversation shifted. "Since I was old enough to hold a crayon. My mother was a curator at the Museum of Modern Art before she retired. I grew up surrounded by incredible works and artists." "That explains your insight into people," Alexander commented. "You're used to looking closely, seeing what others miss." "I suppose so," Olivia agreed. "Though my mother would say I got that from my father. He was a psychiatrist, always analyzing everyone and everything." "Was?" Alexander inquired gently. "He passed away 5 years ago. Cancer." A shadow crossed her face. "He was the one who encouraged me to use my observational skills beyond art. The speech coaching started as a suggestion from him when I was struggling to make ends meet as an artist." "He sounds like a wise man," Alexander said. "He was," Olivia agreed, a fond smile replacing the sadness. "He would have liked you, I think. He appreciated people who were genuine, regardless of their social position." They continued talking as afternoon faded into evening, their conversation flowing naturally from art to business, from personal histories to philosophical questions. Olivia described her journey as an artist, the challenges of establishing herself in a competitive field, and her hopes for an upcoming solo exhibition. Alexander spoke about the origins of Reed Enterprises, his vision for healthcare technology, and the weight of responsibility he felt toward his employees. Before either of them realized it, 2 hours had passed. Olivia glanced at her watch and looked surprised. "I had no idea it was so late," she said. "I need to close up the studio." Alexander helped her straighten the space, stacking easels and returning supplies to their designated spots. As they worked side by side, he felt a comfortable familiarity developing between them, the earlier tension gradually dissipating. When they finished, they stood by the door, neither quite ready to end the encounter. "Thank you for the coffee and conversation," Alexander said, "and for not immediately having me escorted from the premises when I showed up unannounced." Olivia laughed. "I considered it briefly." "I'm glad you reconsidered," Alexander replied with a smile. "I should let you get on with your evening." Olivia hesitated, then said, "There's an opening at the Baxter Gallery tonight. Some friends of mine are exhibiting. I was planning to stop by." She paused. "You could join me if you'd like. As friends." Alexander tried to contain his surprise and pleasure at the invitation. "I'd like that very much." "Just to be clear," Olivia added, "this isn't a date. It's 2 people with a shared interest in art attending a gallery opening." "Of course," Alexander agreed readily, willing to accept any terms that allowed him to spend more time with her. "Just 2 friends appreciating art together." Olivia locked up the studio, and they walked the 6 blocks to the Baxter Gallery, their conversation continuing easily. Alexander found himself more engaged and present than he had been in months, perhaps years. Work, with all its pressures and responsibilities, felt distant for the first time in recent memory. The gallery was crowded when they arrived, the opening in full swing. Alexander noticed Olivia's demeanor shift subtly as they entered. She stood straighter, Her smile became more guarded, her eyes more watchful. It was a change he recognized from his own experience of entering rooms where he was expected to perform a certain role. "Friends of yours here?" he asked quietly. Olivia nodded. "Several, including my ex, who I wasn't expecting to see tonight." She inclined her head toward a tall man with dark-rimmed glasses who was holding court near one of the larger installations. "Gabriel Torres. We were together for 3 years. It ended badly 6 months ago." Before Alexander could respond, a woman with bright blue hair spotted Olivia and rushed over, enveloping her in an enthusiastic hug. "Liv, you came!" she exclaimed, then noticed Alexander. "And you brought someone. This is new and exciting." "Mia, this is Alexander," Olivia said. "A friend." "Alexander, this is Mia Chen, one of my oldest friends and an incredible sculptor." As they exchanged pleasantries, Alexander could feel curious gazes turning their way, including that of Gabriel Torres, whose expression had darkened noticeably upon spotting Olivia with an unfamiliar man. The evening had just become considerably more complicated than a simple gallery visit between friends. Mia looped her arm through Olivia's and pulled her slightly aside. "He's cute," she whispered, not quite quietly enough for Alexander to miss. "And definitely not your usual type." "We're just friends," Olivia insisted, shooting Alexander an apologetic glance. "He was a client." "Mm-hmm," Mia replied skeptically. "Well, just friends or not, Gabriel has noticed, and he's headed this way." Alexander watched as Gabriel Torres detached himself from his admirers and made his way toward them, his eyes fixed on Olivia with an intensity that seemed possessive rather than friendly. Everything about the man exuded artistic confidence, from his fashionably disheveled appearance to the deliberate way he moved through the crowd as if expecting it to part for him. "Olivia," Gabriel said, air-kissing both her cheeks in a European gesture that felt performative. "I didn't expect to see you tonight." "Mia invited me," Olivia replied, her tone polite but cool. "Congratulations on the installation, it's provocative." Gabriel's gaze shifted to Alexander, assessing him with barely concealed disdain. "And who's your friend?" "Alexander Reed," Alexander said before Olivia could respond, extending his hand. "I'm a fan of Olivia's work." Gabriel reluctantly shook his hand. "Gabriel Torres, I'm surprised we haven't met before. I thought I knew all the serious collectors in the city." "I'm relatively new to the contemporary art scene," Alexander admitted. "Very new," Gabriel said, a dismissive edge to his voice. "I don't recall seeing you at any previous openings or auctions." Alexander maintained his cordial demeanor despite the obvious attempt to establish his outsider status. "Everyone has to start somewhere. Olivia's been kind enough to introduce me to some remarkable work tonight." "Has she?" Gabriel's attention swung back to Olivia. "How uncharacteristically generous of you, Liv. You're usually so protective of your artistic connections." Olivia stiffened beside Alexander. "Things change, Gabriel. Now, if you'll excuse us, I promised to show Alexander the piece in the East Gallery." She placed her hand lightly on Alexander's arm, guiding him away from Gabriel, whose expression had darkened at the casual touch. "I'm sorry about that," Olivia murmured once they were out of earshot. "Gabriel can be territorial, even though he's the one who ended things." "No need to apologize," Alexander assured her. "Exes are complicated." "Some more than others," Olivia agreed with a rueful smile. "Gabriel and I were in the same MFA program at Pratt. We had this intense, competitive relationship, pushing each other creatively but also constantly trying to prove something. When we finally called it quits, it wasn't just a breakup. It was like acknowledging a fundamental incompatibility in our artistic approaches." Alexander nodded, understanding more than she might expect. "I've had similar experiences in business partnerships. When your professional identity is so intertwined with a relationship, separating becomes exponentially more complicated." "Exactly," Olivia said. looking slightly surprised at his insight. "It's not just a personal loss, it's questioning part of your professional foundation." They had reached the East Gallery, a quieter space featuring more contemplative works. As they moved from piece to piece, Alexander was struck by how Olivia's comments enhanced his appreciation, helping him see layers and intentions he might have missed. "You're a natural teacher," he observed after she had explained the technique behind a particularly complex mixed-media piece. "I enjoy sharing what I see," Olivia said. "Art can be intimidating if you feel like you need some special knowledge to get it. But really, it's about connection, finding something that speaks to you, whether or not you understand all the technical aspects." "Is that what drives your own work? Creating connections?" Olivia considered the question thoughtfully. "In part, yes. I'm interested in moments of genuine emotion, capturing those brief instances when people reveal who they really are beneath the social masks we all wear." "Like your sketch of me," Alexander said. "Yes," Olivia admitted. "When you were talking about your grandmother and the real reason you started your company, that was a moment of authenticity breaking through the CEO persona. I wanted to capture it." As they continued through the gallery, Alexander found himself increasingly comfortable in this world, so different from his own. The conversations swirling around them about technique, meaning, and creative vision were far removed from the market analysis and strategic planning discussions that filled his days, yet he found them refreshingly stimulating. Olivia introduced him to several other artists, her friends who greeted him with varying degrees of curiosity and acceptance. Alexander noticed that while some seemed surprised by his presence in their circle, none treated him with the overt hostility Gabriel had displayed. "Alexander Reed," a voice said from behind them as they were examining a series of abstract landscapes. "I thought it was you." Alexander turned to find Patricia Winters, chairwoman of the hospital board that had recently partnered with Reed Enterprises on their healthcare integration system. "Patricia," he greeted her warmly. "I didn't know you were an art enthusiast." "My husband sits on the museum board," Patricia explained, gesturing toward a distinguished gray-haired man across the room. "These events are practically mandatory for us." She turned her attention to Olivia. "And who is your lovely companion?" "Olivia Morales," Alexander introduced them. "Olivia, this is Patricia Winters, one of our most important healthcare partners." "A pleasure to meet you," Olivia said, shaking Patricia's hand. Patricia studied Olivia with interest. "Morales, are you the artist with the upcoming solo exhibition at the Weber Gallery?" Olivia looked surprised. "Yes, that's me. Opening night is in 3 weeks." "I saw the preview in Art Forum," Patricia said. "Your work on emotional transparency in the digital age is fascinating. We must have you over for dinner sometime to discuss it." "Thank you," Olivia replied, clearly flattered by the recognition. "That would be lovely." After Patricia excused herself to rejoin her husband, Olivia turned to Alexander with a raised eyebrow. "Important healthcare partners, huh? You move in some influential circles, Mr. Reed." "Says the artist being featured in Art Forum and getting dinner invitations from museum board connections," Alexander countered with a smile. Their easy banter continued as they completed their tour of the gallery. By the time they reached the refreshment table, Alexander realized he was more relaxed and engaged than he had been in any social setting for months, possibly years. The usual weight of constantly maintaining his CEO image had somehow lifted in Olivia's presence. As they sipped mediocre white wine from plastic cups, Gabriel approached again, this time with a striking woman in a dramatic black dress on his arm. "Olivia," he said, his tone falsely warm, "I wanted to introduce you to Vanessa Decker from the Guggenheim Acquisitions Department." "Vanessa, this is Olivia Morales, the artist I was telling you about." The woman extended a manicured hand to Olivia. "Gabriel speaks very highly of your work. He's insisted I need to see your exhibition next month." "That's, unexpectedly kind of him," Olivia said. shooting Gabriel a puzzled look. "Just because we're not together anymore doesn't mean I don't still believe in your talent," Gabriel said magnanimously. His gaze slid to Alexander, whom he had pointedly not introduced. "Though I'm surprised to see your focus has shifted to commercial interests." The implication was clear, and Alexander felt Olivia tense beside him. "My artistic focus hasn't changed," Olivia replied evenly, "and Alexander isn't a commercial interest. Unlike some people, he actually values authenticity." Gabriel's expression hardened. "Is that what you're calling it now? I seem to recall you had quite a different opinion about corporate types using art as a status symbol." Before Olivia could respond, Alexander stepped in smoothly. "I'd be the first to admit I'm a novice in the art world, but I'm genuinely interested in learning, not acquiring status symbols." He turned to Vanessa with a disarming smile. "Though I imagine your position at the Guggenheim gives you fascinating insights into the intersection of art and commerce that might enlighten us both." Vanessa, clearly intrigued by the undercurrents of tension, launched into an analysis of changing trends in institutional acquisitions. Gabriel, finding himself outmaneuvered, eventually steered her away to meet other artists. "Thanks for the save," Olivia said quietly when they were alone again. "Gabriel has a talent for hitting nerves." "Seems like a common trait among exes," Alexander replied. "For what it's worth, I don't think he's over you." Olivia sighed. "It's not me he misses. It's the idea of me, the supportive artist girlfriend who admired his work and helped advance his career. The real me, with my own ambitions and opinions, was always a bit inconvenient." The honesty of her assessment struck Alexander. How many of his own past relationships had followed a similar pattern, with partners attracted to the idea of dating a successful CEO rather than the man himself? "I should probably head out soon," Olivia said, checking her watch. "I have an early studio session tomorrow." "Let me walk you home," Alexander offered, then quickly added, "As a friend, of course." Olivia hesitated, then nodded. "That would be nice. Just let me say goodbye to Mia first." As Olivia sought out her friend, Alexander found himself observing her interactions with the artistic community she belonged to. There was an easy authenticity to the way she moved through these circles, so different from the careful, strategic networking he engaged in at business functions. Yet there were similarities too. The politics, the rivalries, the alliances that formed the invisible architecture of any professional community. When Olivia returned, they slipped out of the gallery together, leaving behind the noise and social complexities for the relative peace of the nighttime streets. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the scent of approaching rain. "So," Olivia said as they walked, "what did you think of your first real immersion in the contemporary art scene?" "Fascinating," Alexander replied honestly. "Not that different from high-level business events in some ways. The networking, the posturing, the subtle power plays. But the conversations are certainly more interesting." Olivia laughed. "I'm not sure whether to be flattered or concerned that you found the art world's drama fascinating." "Definitely flattered," Alexander assured her. "It's been a refreshing change from discussions about market expansions and quarterly projections." They walked in comfortable silence for a few blocks, the city around them gradually shifting from the upscale gallery district to a more eclectic neighborhood of converted warehouses and renovated industrial spaces. "This is me," Olivia said, stopping in front of a 6-story brick building. "My studio is on the 3rd floor. I rent it from a cooperative of artists who bought the building back when this area was still affordable." Alexander looked up at the old factory building, imagining Olivia working within its walls, creating the art that had captured Patricia Winter's attention and earned her an upcoming solo exhibition. "Thank you for letting me tag along tonight," he said. "I enjoyed seeing your world." "It was surprisingly nice having you there," Olivia admitted, even with Gabriel's dramatics. They stood facing each other in the pool of light from the building's entrance, neither quite ready to end the evening. "Olivia," Alexander began, then hesitated, choosing his words carefully. I know you have rules about former clients, and I respect that, but I'd like to see you again. As friends, if that's all you're comfortable with." Olivia studied him for a long moment. "I'd like that too," she said finally. "But I need to be clear about something. My exhibition opens in 3 weeks. Until then, my focus needs to be on completing my work. I can't afford distractions, even pleasant ones." "I understand," Alexander said, hiding his disappointment. "Your career comes first." "For the next 3 weeks, yes," Olivia confirmed. "After that?" "We'll see." She offered a small smile. "Maybe you could come to the opening night, as my guest, not just an attendee." Alexander felt a surge of hope at the invitation. "I'd be honored." "Good night, Alexander," Olivia said, turning toward the building entrance. "Good night, Olivia," he replied, watching as she disappeared inside. As Alexander walked back toward the main avenue to hail a cab, the night's rain finally began to fall, gentle drops that gradually increased in intensity. But even as he quickened his pace, he couldn't help smiling. 3 weeks wasn't so long to wait, not when it held the promise of seeing Olivia again. The 3 weeks leading up to Olivia's exhibition tested Alexander's patience and self-restraint. He had promised to respect her need for focus, which meant minimal contact, just occasional text messages to which she responded warmly but briefly. He threw himself into work, scheduling international video conferences at odd hours and accelerating the timeline for Reed Enterprises' European launch to fill his evenings and weekends. Despite his busy schedule, Alexander found his thoughts repeatedly drifting to Olivia. The gallery opening had given him a glimpse into her world, one so different from the corporate environment he inhabited yet intriguing in its passion and authenticity. He wanted to understand it better, to understand her better. With this in mind, Alexander began educating himself about contemporary art. He hired an art consultant recommended by Patricia Winters, a former museum curator named Eleanor Voss, who didn't hide her surprise when he requested not advice on acquisitions, but a crash course in art appreciation and history. "Most executives want investment guidance," Eleanor commented during their first meeting in his office. "They see art as an alternative asset class, not something to study." "I'm not most executives," Alexander replied, unwilling to explain his personal interest. "I want to understand the language, the context, the significance. If I'm going to enter this world, I don't want to be a tourist." Eleanor assessed him thoughtfully, then nodded. "Refreshing approach. We'll start with the movements that influence today's working artists, then narrow in on specific techniques and themes prevalent in the current scene." Over intensive sessions squeezed between business meetings, Alexander absorbed Eleanor's knowledge like a sponge. He learned about postmodernism and the evolution of conceptual art, the political undercurrents of street art movements, and the ongoing tension between traditional techniques and digital innovation. Eleanor took him to the city's major museums during private after-hours tours, contextualizing the progression of artistic expression through the centuries. "You're a surprisingly apt pupil," Eleanor remarked after their 4th session. "Most people with your background struggle to move beyond viewing art as decoration or investment. I've always believed that understanding creates value," Alexander said. "Whether in business or art, surface-level engagement only gets you so far." As part of his education, Alexander discreetly researched Olivia's work online. Her professional website featured a gallery of her past exhibitions and projects, revealing a coherent artistic vision that evolved over time. Her earlier work focused on traditional portraiture with unconventional materials, while her more recent pieces incorporated digital elements and interactive components that invited viewer participation. Several art blogs and local culture sites had featured interviews with Olivia about her upcoming exhibition, titled Transparent Facades. The show would examine the contrast between public personas and private selves, a theme that resonated deeply with Alexander given their initial coaching session. In one interview, Olivia explained her inspiration. We're living in an era where personal branding has become almost mandatory, yet authentic connection feels increasingly rare. This exhibition explores that tension, the masks we wear, the glimpses of truth that peek through, and the yearning for genuine human connection in a curated world. Reading her words, Alexander felt a jolt of recognition. Wasn't that exactly what had drawn him to her? Her ability to see through his CEO persona to the person beneath? 10 days before the exhibition opening, Alexander received an unexpected call from Patricia Winters. "Alexander," she greeted him warmly. "I'm hosting a small dinner party this Friday for some board members and arts patrons. Your friend Olivia Morales will be attending. Apparently, my husband's been following her work for some time. I thought you might like to join us." Alexander hesitated, remembering Olivia's request for space until her exhibition. "That's kind of you to think of me, Patricia. Has Olivia confirmed her attendance?" "Just this morning," Patricia replied. "I mentioned you might be there and she seemed pleased. I got the impression you two are more than casual acquaintances." "We're friends," Alexander said carefully. "I'd be delighted to attend." After hanging up, Alexander debated whether to text Olivia about the dinner. Would she see his attendance as respecting her boundaries or intruding on her professional opportunity? After several drafted and deleted messages, he finally sent, "Patricia Winters just invited me to dinner Friday. Mentioned you'll be there. Happy to decline if you'd prefer space. Your call." Olivia's response came an hour later. "It's fine. Actually, might be nice to see a friendly face. These collector dinners can be intense." On Friday evening, Alexander arrived at Patricia's elegant townhouse in the historic district, deliberately 10 minutes late to avoid appearing overeager. The drawing room was already filled with about 20 guests, the conversation a sophisticated hum punctuated by occasional laughter. He spotted Olivia immediately. She stood near the fireplace, engaged in conversation with Patricia's husband and an elderly woman wearing an impressive collection of modernist jewelry. Olivia wore a simple black dress that looked more expensive than her usual attire, her curly hair styled in an elegant updo that exposed the graceful line of her neck. Alexander accepted a glass of champagne from a passing server and made his way toward her, greeting other guests as he moved through the room. When Olivia saw him approaching, her face lit up with a smile that sent an unexpected wave of warmth through him. "Alexander," she said when he reached their small group, "I was just telling Edward and Mrs. Rothschild about your recent interest in contemporary art." "A neophyte with enthusiasm," Edward Winters said good-naturedly, shaking Alexander's hand. "The best kind of convert to the cause." Mrs. Rothschild, who turned out to be a major donor to the city's modern art museum, regarded Alexander with shrewd interest. "Patricia tells me you've been working with Eleanor Voss. She doesn't take on just anyone as a client." "I've been fortunate to benefit from her expertise," Alexander replied diplomatically. The conversation flowed easily, with Alexander gratified to find he could now follow most of the artistic references and contribute meaningfully to the discussion. Olivia gave him an impressed look when he correctly identified the influence of neo-expressionism in a painting hanging above the mantel. When dinner was announced, Alexander was pleased to find himself seated beside Olivia, with a venture capitalist known for funding arts initiatives on his other side. "You've been studying," Olivia murmured as they took their seats. "I'm impressed." "I had an excellent teacher," Alexander replied, echoing what he had once said about her coaching. Olivia smiled, recognizing the callback. "Still, I didn't expect you to dive so deeply into art theory and history. When something interests me, I commit to understanding it properly," Alexander said, leaving ambiguous whether he meant art itself or her world. Throughout the dinner, Alexander observed Olivia in this environment of wealth and influence. She navigated it with grace but maintained a slight reserve, as if protecting something essential about herself from being too exposed. When collectors asked pointed questions about her upcoming exhibition or made thinly veiled inquiries about pricing, she redirected the conversation with subtle skill. "You handled them well," Alexander commented during a brief moment when their neighbors were engaged elsewhere. Practice, Olivia replied with a wry smile. Artists need patrons, but there's an art to maintaining boundaries. Too accessible, and they lose interest. Too remote, and they get offended. Sounds familiar, Alexander said. Replace patrons with investors, and you've described half my job. Olivia laughed softly. We're not so different after all. After dinner, as guests mingled over coffee and digestives, Alexander found himself drawn into a conversation about healthcare innovation with several board members. When he next had a chance to look for Olivia, she was deep in conversation with Edward Winters, who was gesturing animatedly about something that had Olivia nodding with increasing enthusiasm. Patricia appeared at Alexander's side, following his gaze. Edward's offering her a residency program at the museum's new digital art lab, she explained. It's quite competitive, only offered to artists they believe have significant potential. That's wonderful, Alexander said sincerely. She deserves the recognition. Patricia studied him with knowing eyes. You care for her, don't you? Beyond professional admiration. Alexander hesitated, then nodded. Is it that obvious? Only to someone who's known you as long as I have, Patricia assured him. You're different around her, more present, less guarded. She patted his arm. It suits you. As the evening drew to a close, Alexander offered to share a car with Olivia as they were heading in the same general direction. Once they were settled in the back seat of the luxury sedan, Olivia let out a long breath and kicked off her heels. These events are exhausting, she admitted, leaning her head back against the seat. Mentally cataloging every word, managing expectations, projecting confidence without arrogance. You were brilliant, Alexander said. Edward Winters seemed particularly impressed. Olivia smiled, her eyes still closed. The residency offer is incredible. State-of-the-art technology, funding for experimental work, exposure to international audiences. It could change everything for me. Will you accept? In a heartbeat, she replied, then opened her eyes to look at him. But first, I need to get through this exhibition. The final preparations are intense. I've barely slept this week. Alexander studied her in the passing streetlights, the shadows under her eyes now visible, the slight tension in her shoulders. Is there anything I can do to help? Olivia started to shake her head, then reconsidered. Actually, I could use a fresh perspective on the exhibition layout. Someone who understands both the art and the viewer experience. She hesitated. Would you be willing to see a preview? Tomorrow afternoon? Only if you're free, of course. I'll make myself free, Alexander said, not caring if his eagerness showed. The car pulled up in front of Olivia's building. Before getting out, she turned to him with a softer expression than he had seen all evening. Thank you for coming tonight, she said. It was nice having an ally in the room. Any time? Alexander replied. What time tomorrow? 3 o'clock at the Weber Gallery? The exhibition is mostly installed, just final adjustments needed. I'll be there. As the car pulled away from the curb, Alexander felt a surge of anticipation. Tomorrow, he would see Olivia's art in its intended setting, her vision made manifest. And perhaps, in understanding her work more deeply, he might understand her too. The thought carried him home through the quiet city streets, the possibility of what might develop between them after her exhibition opening like a beacon on the horizon. The Weber Gallery was closed to the public when Alexander arrived the next afternoon, its front windows covered with promotional graphics announcing Olivia's upcoming exhibition. He knocked on the glass door, and moments later, a young woman with bright purple hair appeared to let him in. You must be Alexander, she said, extending her hand. I'm Zoe, the gallery assistant. Olivia's in the main space making some final adjustments. Alexander followed Zoe through the pristine white entry hall into a large open gallery where Olivia stood on a stepladder, adjusting the lighting on one of her pieces. She wore paint-splattered jeans and a loose chambray shirt, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, a stark contrast to her elegant appearance at last night's dinner. Yet Alexander found this version of her equally compelling, perhaps even more so for its authenticity. "Your 3 o'clock is here," Zoe announced. Olivia looked over her shoulder and smiled when she saw Alexander. "Perfect timing. I could use your height for this adjustment." She climbed down from the ladder and gestured him over. "Can you reach that track light? It needs to be angled about 10 degrees to the right." Alexander removed his suit jacket, draped it over a nearby chair, and climbed the ladder to make the adjustment. "Like this?" he asked, moving the light. "Perfect," Olivia confirmed. "Now I can finally see if this piece works the way I intended." Alexander stepped down and got his first real look at the artwork the light was illuminating. It was a large, mixed-media portrait. A woman's face composed of thousands of tiny mirror fragments, each reflecting different portions of the gallery space. As viewers moved around it, their own reflections would become briefly incorporated into the portrait, creating a constantly changing image. "It's extraordinary," Alexander said, genuinely impressed. "The way it incorporates the viewer into the piece itself." "That's the point of the entire exhibition," Olivia explained, leading him deeper into the gallery. "Every piece involves some element of reflection or transparency, literal or metaphorical." As they moved through the space, Olivia showed him each installation, explaining her creative process and the technical challenges involved. One piece featured video projections onto layered sheets of translucent fabric, creating ghostly images that shifted as viewers walked around them. Another used one-way mirrors and hidden cameras to capture and display candid reactions from unsuspecting gallery visitors. "This is the centerpiece," Olivia said finally, stopping before a large installation in the middle of the main gallery space. "I call it public-private." The piece consisted of a seemingly solid wall constructed of thousands of small cubes. From the front, it displayed a composite image of faces, all ages, ethnicities, expressions, creating a mosaic of humanity. But as Alexander walked around it, he discovered that each cube was actually open on the back side, containing a tiny diorama of intimate moments: a child sleeping, lovers embracing, someone crying alone, an elderly person reading a letter. "The public facade versus the private reality," Alexander observed. "Visible only if you make the effort to look beyond the surface." Olivia nodded, clearly pleased by his understanding. "Exactly. We present these curated versions of ourselves to the world, but behind that is a whole universe of private experiences that define who we truly are." Alexander circled the installation again, studying the intricate details of each tiny scene. "How long did this take you to create?" "Almost a year," Olivia admitted. "I collected the images for the front from social media, the way people choose to present themselves publicly. The private scenes are all handcrafted, inspired by real moments I've observed or experienced." Alexander crouched to examine one particular cube, which contained a miniature scene of a man sitting alone at a desk, surrounded by papers but staring out a tiny window. Something about the solitary figure resonated with him. "That one always catches people's attention," Olivia said softly, kneeling beside him. "The successful man, surrounded by the evidence of his achievements, yet fundamentally isolated." Alexander looked at her, suddenly feeling exposed. "Is that how you see me?" Olivia's eyes widened. "No, that's not. I created this long before we met. But maybe that's why I felt I understood you during our session. I've spent years thinking about these contradictions, the gap between external success and internal fulfillment." Their eyes held for a long moment, the air between them charged with unspoken recognition. Alexander became acutely aware of how close they were, kneeling together in the quiet gallery. Zoe's voice broke the moment. "Olivia, the lighting tech is on the phone with questions about Tuesday's setup." Olivia straightened, a slight flush coloring her cheeks. "I should take that. Feel free to keep looking around. I'll be right back." As Olivia disappeared into the gallery office, Alexander continued examining the exhibition. Each piece revealed another layer of her artistic vision, her preoccupation with authenticity in an increasingly curated world, her technical skill in manipulating materials to create emotional responses, her keen observation of human nature. When he reached a smaller room at the back of the gallery, Alexander was surprised to find a series of more traditional portraits, rendered in charcoal and pastel, rather than the high-tech mixed media dominating the main space. These drawings captured subjects in moments of unguarded emotion, an elderly man's face crumpling with grief, a child's expression of pure wonder, a woman laughing with uninhibited joy. "These are earlier works," Olivia said, returning to find him studying the portraits. "Edward insisted on including them to show the evolution of my technique." "They're powerful," Alexander said. "More direct than the conceptual pieces, but exploring the same themes." "They're more personal too," Olivia admitted. "Each one is someone I know intimately. Family, close friends. I can only capture that kind of emotional truth when there's trust." She paused, then added quietly, "That's why your sketch from our session surprised me. I don't usually connect that deeply with clients." The admission hung in the air between them, an acknowledgement of the unusual bond that had formed during their brief professional encounter. "So," Olivia said, changing the subject, "now that you've seen everything, what do you think? Does the exhibition flow? Is the narrative clear? Be honest. I need objective feedback before the opening." Alexander considered carefully, respecting her request for professional critique rather than simple praise. The progression works well. Starting with the more accessible, reflective pieces draws viewers in before challenging them with the more conceptual installations. My only suggestion would be to move the echo chamber piece closer to digital identity. They speak to each other thematically. Olivia tilted her head, considering his suggestion. "You're right. They do address similar questions about how technology mediates our self-perception." She smiled appreciatively. "You've been paying attention in your art education." "I had motivation to learn quickly," Alexander replied with a meaningful look that made Olivia glance away, though not before he caught the slight upward curve of her lips. They spent the next hour rearranging several pieces based on their discussion, debating the merits of different placements and lighting angles. Alexander was surprised by how much he enjoyed the process. The focus on aesthetic and emotional impact rather than profit margins and market share was refreshingly engaging. "This is actually fun," he admitted as they stepped back to assess their latest adjustment. "In my world, decisions are always weighed against financial implications. There's something liberating about making choices based solely on emotional and artistic impact." "Don't be fooled," Olivia replied with a wry smile. "Art has its financial considerations too. These placements will affect which pieces catch collectors' attention, which could significantly impact sales." "True, but the primary goal is still artistic expression," Alexander pointed out. "In business, profit is always the ultimate measure of success." "And what about Reed Enterprises?" Olivia asked. "Isn't your healthcare integration system designed to help people first and foremost? The profit enables the mission, but it's not the mission itself." Alexander paused, struck by her insight. "You're right. That's exactly how I've always thought about it, though I rarely articulate it that way to shareholders." "Maybe you should," Olivia suggested. "Authentic purpose is compelling. It's why your revised speech was so effective. You let people see beyond the business metrics to the human intention behind them." As evening approached, they finished the final adjustments, and Zoe prepared to lock up the gallery. Outside, the early autumn air had turned crisp, hints of the coming season in the breeze that rustled the trees lining the street. "Thank you for your help today," Olivia said as they stood on the sidewalk. "Your perspective was valuable." "Thank you for trusting me to see your work before it's officially unveiled," Alexander replied. "It's given me a deeper appreciation for what you do." An awkward moment followed as they both seemed unsure how to end their time together. Finally, Alexander spoke. "Have you eaten? There's a good bistro around the corner." Olivia hesitated. "I should really get back to my studio. There are still a few pieces needing final touches before they're transported here on Monday." "Of course," Alexander said, hiding his disappointment. "I understand." "But," Olivia continued, "I am starving and I probably shouldn't skip meals even with the deadline looming." She smiled. "A quick dinner would be nice." The bistro was quiet when they arrived, most of the after-work crowd having already dispersed. They were seated at a corner table beside a window overlooking a small courtyard garden illuminated by string lights. Over simple but excellent food, steak frites for Alexander, roasted vegetable tart for Olivia, their conversation flowed naturally from art to business, from childhood memories to future aspirations. The professional pretense that had initially brought them together gradually gave way to genuine personal connection. "I hardly know anything about your life outside work," Olivia realized as they shared a dessert. "Do you have family in the city?" "My sister Jennifer lives downtown with her wife and their son," Alexander replied. "My parents are in Boston, where I grew up. Dad still teaches economics at MIT, and Mom runs a non-profit focused on urban education." He took a sip of his wine. "What about you? You mentioned your mother was a curator?" "Yes, though she's retired now. She lives in Santa Fe with my stepfather. My father's family is mostly in Puerto Rico. I try to visit at least once a year." "Do you have siblings?" "A younger brother in med school in California," Olivia said with evident pride. "Miguel is the scientific mind in the family. He's researching neurological disorders. Our father would have been so proud of him." Their conversation continued, filling in the personal details that had been missing from their previous encounters. By the time they finished their coffee, Alexander felt he had gained a much clearer picture of the woman behind the artistic talent. "I should get you home," he said eventually, noting the lateness of the hour. "You have work to finish for the exhibition." Outside the restaurant, Alexander hailed a taxi, but as one approached, Olivia touched his arm. "Actually, I think I'll walk. My studio isn't far, and the air will help clear my head." "May I walk with you?" Alexander asked. "Just to see you safely home." Olivia considered for a moment, then nodded. "I'd like that." As they strolled through the quiet streets, their conversation gave way to comfortable silence. When they reached Olivia's building, she turned to face him. 9 days until the opening," she said. "Then this whirlwind of preparation will finally be over." "You'll be brilliant," Alexander assured her. "Your work is exceptional, Olivia." She smiled, looking both nervous and excited about what lay ahead. "I hope so. There's so much riding on this exhibition." "I'm looking forward to seeing the finished result," Alexander said, "and to whatever comes after." The implication was clear, and Olivia didn't pretend to misunderstand. "So am I," she admitted softly. They stood looking at each other in the gentle glow of the street lamp, the moment suspended between them with possibility. Then Olivia leaned forward and kissed Alexander lightly on the cheek, a whisper of contact that felt more significant than any professional handshake. "Good night, Alexander," she said, stepping back. "Good night, Olivia." Alexander watched as she entered her building, then turned and began the long walk home, his mind filled with images of mirror fragments reflecting infinite possibilities and the warmth of Olivia's lips against his cheek. The week before Olivia's exhibition opening passed in a blur of activity for both of them. Alexander was immersed in finalizing details for Reed Enterprises' European launch, while Olivia worked feverishly on the last preparations for her show. They exchanged brief texts, Olivia sharing photos of the completed installation, Alexander sending encouraging messages and updates about his suddenly hectic schedule. 3 days before the opening, Alexander received an unexpected opportunity that complicated their tentative plans. His phone rang as he was finishing a late conference call with Tokyo investors. "Alexander Reed," he answered, suppressing a yawn as he loosened his tie. "Alexander, it's Warren Chen. came the voice of Asia's most prominent healthcare technology investor. "I've been following your European expansion with interest." Alexander straightened in his chair, instantly alert. Warren Chen was notoriously private and selective about his investments. Reed Enterprises had been attempting to secure a meeting with him for nearly 2 years without success. "Mr. Chen, this is an unexpected pleasure. I'll be in the city this weekend to attend my niece's wedding," Chen continued without preamble. "I'd like to discuss a potential partnership for your Asian market entry. My yacht will be docked at the marina. Join me for a 3-day cruise up the coast, departing Saturday morning. We'll have ample time to explore opportunities." Alexander's mind raced. Saturday morning was the day of Olivia's exhibition opening, scheduled for 7 p.m. If he accepted Chen's invitation, he would miss it entirely. "Your timing is fortuitous," Alexander replied carefully. "We've just completed our feasibility studies for Asian market expansion. However, I have a prior commitment Saturday evening that's quite important." "I understand the demands on your time," Chen said, his tone cooling slightly. "Perhaps another opportunity will arise in the future." Alexander recognized the diplomatic withdrawal. Warren Chen didn't extend invitations twice. This could be Reed Enterprises' only chance to secure the partnership they needed for successful expansion into the lucrative Asian markets. "My team has worked incredibly hard on our Asian strategy," Alexander found himself saying. "I would be remiss not to explore this opportunity. What time Saturday?" "Excellent," Chen replied. "We depart at 8 a.m. sharp. My assistant will send the details. Pack light. Everything is provided on board." After hanging up, Alexander sat motionless, conflicted about the choice he had just made. The rational CEO in him knew it was the right business decision. Warren Chen's backing would accelerate their international expansion by years and potentially help millions more patients, yet he couldn't shake the hollow feeling in his chest when he thought about missing Olivia's exhibition. With a heavy sigh, Alexander picked up his phone and dialed Olivia's number. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice distracted. "Alexander, give me just a second." He heard muffled conversation in the background, then the sound of a door closing. "Sorry about that. I'm at the gallery with the promotional team." "I won't keep you," Alexander said. "I just wanted to let you know about a situation that's come up." He explained about Warren Chen's invitation and its significance for Reed Enterprises. There was a brief silence when he finished. "So you'll miss the opening," Olivia said finally, her tone carefully neutral. "I'm afraid so," Alexander confirmed. "I wouldn't cancel if it weren't critical to the company's future. Millions of patients could benefit from this partnership." "I understand," Olivia said. "Really, I do. Business opportunities like this don't come along every day." "I'm truly sorry," Alexander said, wishing he could see her face to gauge her real feelings. "I've been looking forward to celebrating your success." "It's fine," Olivia assured him, though her voice had lost some of its warmth. "The exhibition runs for 3 weeks. You can see it when you get back." "It won't be the same," Alexander said. "I wanted to be there for your moment." "Alexander, it's okay," Olivia said more firmly. "I need to get back to the team now. Good luck with your meeting." Before he could respond, she had ended the call. Alexander stared at his phone, unsettled by the conversation. Olivia had said all the right things, but her quick dismissal suggested she was more disappointed than she'd admitted. The next morning, Alexander was reviewing documents for the Chen meeting when his assistant Emma announced an unexpected visitor. "Ms. Morales is here to see you, sir." Alexander looked up in surprise as Olivia entered his office. She wore her usual artist attire, jeans and a paint-speckled shirt, but seemed oddly formal in her manner. "This is unexpected," Alexander said, rising to greet her. "I was in the neighborhood for a media interview," Olivia explained, remaining near the door. "I realized I had something of yours." She held out a small paper bag. Alexander accepted it, looking inside to find the notebook he had left at her studio weeks earlier. "You didn't need to deliver this personally." "It seemed important," Olivia said with a slight shrug. Notes from your Asian market strategy? Might be useful for your yacht meeting." There was an edge to her voice that Alexander couldn't quite interpret. Not quite sarcasm, but something close. "Olivia, about that," he began. "I want you to know—" "You don't need to explain," she interrupted. "I meant what I said yesterday. I understand how these things work. Major business opportunity versus an art opening? It's an obvious choice." "That's not fair," Alexander said. "This isn't about comparing values. In an ideal world, I'd be at both." Olivia's expression softened slightly. "You're right. That was uncalled for. I guess I'm more stressed about the opening than I realized." She sighed. "The truth is, I was looking forward to having you there. But I also understand the position you're in." "Thank you," Alexander said, relieved by her honesty. "I was looking forward to it too." An awkward silence fell between them, filled with unspoken thoughts. "Well, I should let you get back to your preparations," Olivia said eventually. "Have a good trip." "Wait," Alexander said as she turned to leave. "Maybe we could have dinner tonight. A private celebration before I leave." Olivia hesitated. "I appreciate the thought, but I'm absolutely swamped. Last-minute press interviews, final checks on the installations. I barely have time to breathe." Alexander nodded, hiding his disappointment. "I understand. Rain check for when I return?" "Sure," Olivia agreed, though something in her tone suggested uncertainty. "Good luck with your investor." After she left, Alexander sat at his desk, troubled by their interaction. Something had shifted between them, a subtle cooling that he couldn't quite address in the limited time they had. He considered canceling the Chen meeting, but the rational part of his mind knew that would be professionally irresponsible. Reed Enterprises employed thousands of people who depended on the company's continued growth and success. The rest of the day passed in a whirlwind of preparations. Alexander briefed his executive team on the Chen opportunity, reviewed market projections for Asia, and packed an overnight bag for the cruise. Throughout it all, thoughts of Olivia kept intruding, her controlled disappointment, the careful distance she had maintained during their brief meeting. That evening, as Alexander was about to leave his office, Miranda stopped by with final documents for the Chen presentation. "All set for tomorrow?" she asked, noticing his distracted expression. "You don't seem your usual focused self." Alexander sighed. "Just weighing priorities." Miranda raised an eyebrow. "This is Warren Chen we're talking about, the man who single-handedly funded the medical technology revolution in Southeast Asia. What could possibly compete with that opportunity?" "Nothing professionally," Alexander admitted, "but personally, there's someone whose art exhibition opens tomorrow night. Someone important to me." Understanding dawned on Miranda's face. "Ah, the artist from the gallery opening. Patricia mentioned you two seemed close." "We were getting there," Alexander said. "Now I'm not so sure." "If she's worth your time, she'll understand that this is who you are," Miranda said pragmatically. "Your commitment to Reed Enterprises is part of what makes you successful." "Perhaps," Alexander replied, unconvinced. "But success by whose definition?" Later that night, unable to sleep, Alexander stood at his penthouse windows looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Olivia was likely still at the gallery, perfecting final details for her exhibition. The thought of her working late, preparing for her professional milestone without him there to support her, sat uncomfortably in his chest. On impulse, he called a 24-hour florist and arranged for their most elaborate arrangement to be delivered to the Weber Gallery the next evening, just before the opening. He labored over the accompanying note, writing and discarding several versions before settling on, "Celebrating your vision and talent from afar. Wish I could be there to see the world discover what I already know, that you're extraordinary. Alexander." It was a poor substitute for his presence, but it was the best he could offer under the circumstances. With that small gesture completed, Alexander finally went to bed, though sleep eluded him for much of the night. The next morning dawned clear and bright, perfect weather for a coastal cruise. Alexander arrived at the marina precisely at 7:30 a.m., where a crew member escorted him to Chen's yacht, an impressive 200-foot vessel with sleek lines and state-of-the-art appointments. Warren Chen greeted him on the upper deck, a surprisingly youthful man in his 50s with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Reed. I hope you're prepared for a productive weekend." "I look forward to it," Alexander replied, shaking the investor's hand firmly. As the yacht's engines hummed to life and the crew prepared to cast off, Alexander gazed back at the city skyline. Somewhere in those buildings, Olivia was beginning her day, perhaps with a mixture of excitement and nerves about the evening ahead. For a brief, irrational moment, he considered jumping ship, quite literally, and racing back to be with her. Instead, he took a deep breath and turned to face Warren Chen, slipping into his role as CEO with practiced ease. "Shall we begin with an overview of our integration systems applications in rural healthcare settings? I believe that might align particularly well with your interests in Southeast Asian markets." As the yacht pulled away from the dock, Alexander pushed thoughts of Olivia to a compartment in his mind, focusing instead on the business opportunity before him. It was a skill he had perfected over years of leadership, the ability to set aside personal concerns and give his complete attention to the task at hand. Yet as the city receded in the distance, Alexander couldn't help wondering if that same skill, so valuable in business, might ultimately cost him something far more precious in his personal life. While Alexander sailed up the coast on Warren Chen's yacht, Olivia stood in the center of the Weber Gallery, watching the exhibition space transform for the evening ahead. Staff bustled around her, arranging champagne flutes, adjusting lighting, and finalizing the placement of information cards beside each piece. In just a few hours, the empty gallery would fill with critics, collectors, and curious art lovers eager to see her work. "The press packets are ready, and we've confirmed attendance from all the major art publications," Zoe reported, tablet in hand. "Edward Winters says the museum board members will arrive around 7:30. "Thank you," Olivia replied, trying to focus on the logistics rather than the hollow feeling that had persisted since her conversation with Alexander. She had meant what she said about understanding his choice. The rational part of her recognized the significance of the business opportunity he'd described, but rationality didn't prevent disappointment. "Oh, and the caterers need to know where to set up the—" Zoe stopped mid-sentence, distracted by something at the gallery entrance. "Wow." Olivia turned to see two delivery men struggling through the door with an enormous floral arrangement, a spectacular cascade of white orchids, blue hydrangeas, and delicate greenery in a sleek modern vase. "Delivery for Ms. Morales," one of the men announced, setting the arrangement on the reception desk. "Where would you like it?" By the entrance, I suppose," Olivia said, surprised. She reached for the card nestled among the blooms and recognized Alexander's handwriting immediately. Reading his message, Olivia felt a complicated mixture of emotions. The gesture was thoughtful, the words sincere, yet flowers, no matter how extravagant, couldn't replace his presence. She slipped the card into her pocket, unsure whether it soothed or deepened the disappointment. Meanwhile, 60 miles up the coast, Alexander sat across from Warren Chen in the yacht's elegant conference room, discussing financial projections for Reed Enterprises' proposed Asian expansion. The meeting was going exceptionally well. Chen asked incisive questions that demonstrated genuine interest and offered insights from his extensive experience in Asian healthcare markets. "Your integration system addresses a critical gap," Chen observed, studying the prototype demonstration on a tablet. "Particularly for rural communities where medical expertise is limited." "That's been our focus from the beginning," Alexander agreed. "Technology isn't just about efficiency, it's about expanding access to quality care for populations that have been historically underserved." Chen nodded approvingly. "Refreshing perspective. Too many tech executives see healthcare purely as a market opportunity rather than a human necessity." As they broke for lunch, an exquisite meal served on the yacht's sun deck, Alexander found his thoughts drifting to the Weber Gallery. It was just past noon. Olivia would be making final preparations, perhaps dealing with last-minute installation issues or press inquiries. Had his flowers arrived? Did she understand what he was trying to convey with them? "You seem distracted, Mr. Reed," Chen observed, breaking into his thoughts. Alexander refocused his attention. "My apologies. Just considering how your suggestions might be implemented in our development timeline." Chen studied him thoughtfully. "When I researched you before our meeting, I was impressed by your single-minded dedication to Reed Enterprises. Your personal life seemed almost non-existent. No scandals, no public relationships, just work." Alexander wasn't sure how to respond to this unusual observation. "It's a common pattern among successful founders," Chen continued. "They pour everything into their companies, leaving little room for anything else. I recognized it because I lived it myself for decades." He took a sip of his wine. "Until my heart attack 3 years ago." "I wasn't aware," Alexander said. "Few people are. I kept it quiet." Chen gazed out at the ocean. "Nothing focuses the mind quite like mortality. I realized I had built an empire but neglected to build a life." He turned back to Alexander. "Is there somewhere else you'd rather be today, Mr. Reed?" The directness of the question caught Alexander off guard. For a moment he considered offering a diplomatic denial, but something in Chen's expression, a knowing empathy, prompted honesty instead. "Yes," Alexander admitted. "A friend's art exhibition opens tonight. It's important to her, and I wanted to be there." "Yet you chose this meeting instead," Chen observed without judgment. "Reed Enterprises is expanding into international markets. This partnership could accelerate our growth by years, helping millions more patients. The choice seemed clear from a business perspective." Chen nodded. "Logical. But in my experience, the most successful business leaders maintain balance between ambition and personal fulfillment. One fuels the other." Back at the Weber Gallery, the opening night of Transparent Facades was exceeding all expectations. By 8 o'clock, the space was packed with attendees, creating an energy that seemed to bring Olivia's installations to life. Critics huddled in corners, speaking in low, excited tones. Collectors discreetly consulted with gallery staff about available pieces. Even Gabriel had appeared, visibly displeased by the exhibition's obvious success. Olivia moved through the crowd in a simple but elegant black dress, responding to questions about her creative process and accepting congratulations from admirers. She played her role perfectly, gracious, articulate, passionate about her work, while a part of her remained detached, observing the scene as if from a distance. "The reviews are already coming in online," Edward Winters whispered excitedly during a brief moment between conversations. "Artforum's critic is calling you the most insightful new voice examining digital age authenticity. This is exactly the reception we hoped for." Olivia smiled, genuinely pleased by the recognition yet unable to fully embrace the triumph of the moment. Her gaze kept drifting to the entrance, irrationally hoping that Alexander might appear despite knowing he was miles away on a yacht with an important investor. "You've done something remarkable here," Patricia Winters said, approaching with a glass of champagne. "The way you've captured the tension between public performance and private reality, it's profound." "Thank you," Olivia replied. "That means a great deal coming from you." Patricia glanced at the spectacular floral arrangement by the entrance. "Alexander sent those, I presume?" "He mentioned he had an unavoidable business commitment." "Yes," Olivia confirmed. "A potential Asian market investor." "Warren Chen," Patricia nodded. "A significant opportunity for Reed Enterprises, though I know Alexander was disappointed to miss your opening." She studied Olivia with knowing eyes. "He's different with you, you know, more present, less guarded." Before Olivia could respond, Zoe appeared at her elbow. "The Times critic wants a brief statement about the public-private installation. And the gallery director says the red dots are going up faster than she's ever seen. Nearly half the collection is already sold. As Olivia was pulled back into her professional obligations, Patricia's observation lingered in her mind. The irony wasn't lost on her, an exhibition about authenticity and connection, celebrated by everyone except the one person whose genuine recognition she most valued. On the yacht, dinner had concluded, and Alexander found himself on the deck with Warren Chen, watching the sunset paint the sky in vivid oranges and pinks. Their business discussions had been productive beyond his highest expectations. Chen had expressed clear interest in a substantial investment, pending some final technical evaluations. "I've kept you long enough for one day," Chen said, checking his watch. "We'll resume tomorrow morning. Perhaps you'd like to use the satellite phone? The exhibition must be well underway by now." Alexander looked at him in surprise. "That's very considerate." Chen smiled slightly. "I may be primarily a businessman, but I'm not entirely unsentimental. The communications room is down one level, first door on the right. Complete privacy." Alexander thanked him and made his way to the communications room where a state-of-the-art satellite phone awaited. He dialed Olivia's number, uncertain whether she would answer during her opening night. To his surprise, she picked up after just 2 rings. "Alexander?" Her voice was barely audible over the background noise of the crowded gallery. "Olivia, I wanted to call and see how it's going." "It's going well," she replied, her tone professionally cordial rather than warm. "Very well, actually. The response has been overwhelming." "I'm not surprised," Alexander said sincerely. "Your work is extraordinary. Did you receive the flowers?" "Yes, thank you. They're beautiful." There was a pause, filled with the sounds of the gallery event. "I should go. There are people waiting to speak with me." "Of course. I just wanted to—" But she had already ended the call. Alexander sat staring at the phone, the brief conversation replaying in his mind. He had heard the distance in her voice, the polite barrier erected between them. It was the same tone she had used when speaking to Gabriel at the gallery opening they had attended together, pleasant but detached, revealing nothing of her true feelings. He gazed out the window at the darkening coastline, thinking about Warren Chen's words regarding balance and fulfillment. For years, Alexander had defined himself primarily through Reed Enterprises' success, measuring his worth by business metrics and market expansion. It had seemed a worthy focus for his energy and passion. Yet, in the past few weeks with Olivia, he had experienced something different, a connection based not on achievement or status, but on mutual recognition of something authentic in each other. She had seen past his CEO persona to the person beneath, and he had glimpsed the thoughtful, passionate woman behind her artistic talent. Was he willing to let that connection dissolve for the sake of a business opportunity, however significant? Alexander made his way back to the deck, where Chen was enjoying a cognac under the stars. "Mr. Chen," he said, his decision crystallizing as he spoke, "I've greatly appreciated our discussions today, and I'm honored by your interest in Reed Enterprises. However, I need to return to the city tonight." Chen raised his eyebrows. "The exhibition?" "Yes," Alexander admitted. "I've realized it's important that I be there, not just for her, but for myself as well." To his surprise, Chen nodded with apparent approval. "A helicopter can be arranged. It will mean cutting our meeting short, but I believe I've seen enough to make an informed decision." He extended his hand. "I respect a man who knows when business should yield to more personal priorities." Within the hour, Alexander found himself in a helicopter flying back toward the city, its lights glittering below like fallen stars. The Weber Gallery would be closing soon. He had perhaps 30 minutes to make it there before the opening night concluded. As the helicopter landed at the city heliport, Alexander checked his watch. 9:45 p.m. The exhibition was scheduled to end at 10. He sprinted to a waiting car, instructing the driver to take the fastest route possible to the gallery. Traffic conspired against him, each red light an exercise in frustration. Alexander found himself mentally calculating alternate routes, willing the car to move faster through the congested streets. At 10:05 p.m., the car finally pulled up in front of the Weber Gallery. The crowd was thinning, guests departing with exhibition catalogs in hand, their animated conversations suggesting a successful event. Alexander paid the driver and rushed toward the entrance, hoping he wasn't too late. Inside the gallery, the exhibition was winding down. Staff had begun discreetly collecting empty champagne flutes while the remaining guests made their final observations of the artwork. Olivia stood with Edward and Patricia Winters near her central installation, discussing plans for the museum residency. "We'll need to schedule the formal announcement next week," Edward was saying. "The museum board is unanimously enthusiastic about your digital art project." "That's wonderful," Olivia replied, though her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Despite the evening's undeniable success, glowing reviews, impressive sales, professional recognition, she felt strangely hollow. "Olivia," Patricia said gently, "are you all right? This should be a triumphant moment for you." Before Olivia could answer, a commotion at the entrance drew their attention. Alexander had arrived, slightly breathless, his usually impeccable appearance somewhat disheveled. He scanned the room until his gaze found Olivia, and then he moved purposefully toward her, weaving through the dispersing crowd. "Alexander," Patricia greeted him with evident surprise. "I thought you were up the coast with Warren Chen." "I was," Alexander confirmed, his eyes fixed on Olivia. "I came back." Olivia stood perfectly still, her expression carefully neutral despite the tumult of emotions his unexpected appearance had triggered. "Your meeting ended early?" "I ended it," Alexander said simply. "Some opportunities are more important than others." Edward, sensing the personal nature of the moment, tactfully took Patricia's arm. "We should check in with the gallery director before we leave. Olivia, we'll talk tomorrow about the residency details." As the Winters discreetly withdrew, Olivia and Alexander faced each other in the gradually emptying gallery, surrounded by her artwork about masks and authenticity, public facades and private truths. "You didn't have to cut your meeting short," Olivia said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I understand how important it was." "It was important," Alexander agreed. "Chen is considering a substantial investment in Reed Enterprises, which would accelerate our Asian expansion significantly." Olivia nodded, unsure why he was telling her this. "Then you should be there, finalizing the deal." "That's what I've always told myself," Alexander said. "That the company comes first, that nothing is more important than its success. And for years that seemed right. But recently—" He gestured to the exhibition around them. "Recently I've been reminded that there are different kinds of value, different kinds of success." Olivia remained silent, unwilling to make this moment easier for him. "I wanted to see your exhibition on opening night," Alexander continued. "Not just the artwork itself, though that's extraordinary, but to witness the culmination of your vision, to be part of the moment when the world recognizes what I've already seen in you." "Alexander, please, let me finish," he said gently. "When you helped me with my speech, you taught me something important. You showed me that professional success is most meaningful when it's connected to personal truth. I've spent years building Reed Enterprises, and I'm proud of what we've accomplished. But somewhere along the way, I started defining myself entirely through that success." Alexander moved closer, his voice lowering. "Then I met you, and you saw through all that. You sketched a version of me I barely recognized but desperately wanted to be. Authentic, connected, passionate, not just about business metrics but about making a real difference." Olivia's carefully maintained composure began to soften. "I drew what I saw." "I know," Alexander said. "That's what makes you such a remarkable artist and such a disconcerting person to be around." He smiled slightly. "You see too much." "Not everything," Olivia admitted. "I didn't see you coming back tonight." Neither did I until Warren Chen of all people made me realize what I was sacrificing for business as usual. Alexander glanced around at the installation nearest them, a piece featuring layers of transparent screens showing fragments of identity. Your exhibition is about the gap between how we present ourselves and who we really are. I don't want that gap in my life anymore. Zoe approached hesitantly. Sorry to interrupt, but we're closing in 15 minutes. Most of the guests have left. Thank you, Zoe. Olivia nodded. Turning back to Alexander, she asked, Have you even had a chance to see the exhibition? Not properly, he admitted. Then let me show you, Olivia said, making a decision. A private tour. They walked through the now quiet gallery, Olivia explaining each piece, its techniques and intentions. Alexander listened intently, asking thoughtful questions that reflected his recent art education. As they moved through the exhibition, the professional distance Olivia had maintained began to dissolve, replaced by the natural connection they had shared before. This is my favorite, Alexander said when they reached the public-private installation. The detail in each hidden scene is remarkable. It took the longest to create, Olivia confirmed. Each miniature diorama represents something I've observed or experienced, moments of vulnerability rarely shown to the world. Alexander circled the piece, studying the tiny private tableaus visible only from behind the public facade. Which one represents you? Olivia hesitated, then pointed to a small cube near the bottom corner. Inside was a miniature artist's studio where a female figure stood at an easel, painting not a canvas, but a window looking out at the world. Creating art is how I make sense of things, she explained. It's how I process what I see around me, the beauty, the pain, the complexities of human connection. When I'm working, I feel most authentically myself. That's how I felt during our coaching session, Alexander said quietly. When you helped me connect my business vision to my personal story, that moment of alignment was clarifying. They had completed the circuit of the gallery and stood now before Olivia's flowers, their elaborate beauty commanding the entry space. Thank you for these, Olivia said. They're gorgeous. A poor substitute for being here, Alexander replied. Did the evening go well? Before I arrived, I mean. Very well, Olivia said, genuine pride warming her voice. Several pieces sold, including the central installation. The reviews are strong, and Edward confirmed the museum residency. You deserve it all, Alexander said sincerely. Your work is powerful, Olivia. It makes people think about how they move through the world, how they connect or fail to connect with others. Zoe approached again, apologetically. We really need to close now. Of course. Olivia nodded. Turning to Alexander, she added, I should stay to help with the final lockup. May I wait for you? He asked. Perhaps we could get a late dinner or coffee afterward? Olivia considered for a moment, then nodded. I'd like that. Alexander stepped outside while Olivia completed her closing responsibilities with the gallery staff. The night air was cool and clear, the street quiet except for the occasional passing car. He thought about the choice he had made, leaving Warren Chen's yacht and a potentially transformative business opportunity to be here instead. Strangely, he felt no regret, only a certainty that he was exactly where he needed to be. 15 minutes later, Olivia emerged from the gallery, having changed from her formal dress into jeans and a sweater, her curly hair released from its elegant updo. There's a 24-hour diner around the corner, she suggested. Nothing fancy, but their food is good. The diner was nearly empty at this late hour, just a few night shift workers and college students occupying booths. Olivia and Alexander settled into a corner table, ordering coffee and breakfast food despite the late hour. So what happens with your investor now? Olivia asked once they were alone. Will he still consider the partnership? Surprisingly, yes, Alexander replied. Before I left, Chen told me he'd seen enough to make his decision. He seemed to respect my choice to return for your opening. That's fortunate, Olivia said, relieved. I would have hated for you to sacrifice a major opportunity. Alexander studied her across the table. Would you? Even though I missed most of your exhibition opening? Even so, Olivia confirmed. I was disappointed, yes, but I understood your position. Our careers are important parts of who we are. They are, Alexander agreed. But they're not everything. He reached across the table, his hand covering hers. Olivia, these past few weeks have been revelatory for me. You've helped me see beyond the narrow definition of success I've been operating under for years. You've affected me too, Olivia admitted softly. After things ended with Gabriel, I was hesitant to get involved with anyone, especially someone from such a different world. But you surprised me. You actually wanted to understand my art, my perspective, not just collect it or use it as a backdrop for your success. I still want to understand, Alexander said. I want to know you better, beyond the professional boundaries we started with. I'd like that too, Olivia replied, turning her hand to intertwine her fingers with his. They talked for hours, the diner gradually emptying around them as night deepened toward dawn. Their conversation ranged widely, from childhood memories to professional challenges, from philosophical questions about art and technology to simple preferences for seasons and foods. With each exchanged story, the connection between them strengthened, transcending the different worlds they inhabited. As the first hint of sunrise colored the sky outside the diner windows, Alexander broached a subject he had been considering since his conversation with Warren Chen. I have a proposition for you, he said. Reed Enterprises has a partnership with conservation organizations along the coast. Next month, we're sponsoring a research cruise to study marine ecosystems affected by climate change. I'll be aboard for the first week, meeting with environmental scientists and discussing technology solutions. He paused, then continued. I'd like you to join me. The scenery is spectacular, and I thought perhaps it might inspire your work. Olivia looked surprised. A research cruise? It's not exactly a luxury yacht, Alexander admitted with a smile. More functional than fashionable. But the ship has been retrofitted with minimal environmental impact systems, and the research team includes some of the leading marine biologists in the country. I thought you might find it interesting, perhaps even the basis for a new artistic project. Combining your world and mine, Olivia observed thoughtfully. Science, technology, art, and nature. Exactly, Alexander nodded. No professional expectations, no speech coaching, no corporate agendas, just us, exploring something meaningful together. Olivia's expression softened. That sounds wonderful, actually. So you'll come? Yes, she decided, smiling fully for the first time that night. I'd love to. Outside the diner, as dawn broke over the city, Alexander walked Olivia home through streets gradually awakening to a new day. Their hands remained linked, a simple connection that felt both fragile and profound. At her building, Olivia turned to face him. Thank you for coming back tonight. Not many people would have made that choice. I'm learning that some journeys are worth interrupting others for, Alexander replied. Some connections matter more than conventional success. In the gentle light of early morning, Alexander leaned down as Olivia reached up, their lips meeting in a kiss that felt like the beginning of something authentic and true. No professional personas, no strategic considerations. Just two people who had somehow seen past each other's facades to the genuine selves beneath. As they parted, both knew that whatever lay ahead, whether smooth sailing or unexpected storms, they would navigate it together, with eyes open and hearts engaged. In a world of transparent facades and carefully curated presentations, they had found in each other something increasingly rare, the courage to be seen and the willingness to truly see. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen.